The last thing my sergeant said to me in basic training was this: "Son, you will never be a real soldier." And I believed him, because at that exact moment, I was face down in the mud, 20 pounds behind every other recruit, too exhausted to even finish the run. What he didn't know, what I didn't know, was that one day, thousands of soldiers would be trapped behind enemy lines. And the order to save them, or lose them, would come down to me. But we're getting way ahead of ourselves. I joined the Army with nothing. No money, no family name, no backup plan. Back home, my mother worked 2 jobs and still couldn't cover rent. I signed my enlistment papers at 18. Not because I was brave, but because I was out of options. The recruiter smiled and said, "The Army will make a man out of you." I didn't tell him I wasn't sure I'd survive the first month. And I almost didn't. Basic training broke me. Every push-up, every mile, every drill, I was always last. The other recruits stopped waiting for me. The sergeant stopped using my name and just called me Ghost, because he was sure I'd wash out and disappear. One night I sat on the edge of my bunk with my discharge papers half filled out in my hands. I was one signature away from quitting. Then a kid across the room, his name was Marcus, tossed me an extra protein bar and said, "Finish the run tomorrow, I'll pace you." I didn't know it yet, but Marcus was about to change my entire life. And a few years later, I'd almost be the reason he lost his. I stayed. I finished. I graduated. Barely. Then came my first real deployment, my first firefight, my first command decision. We were clearing a village at dawn when I caught movement on the ridge. I had a choice: hold position and wait for confirmation, or move fast and flank them. I wanted to prove I wasn't Ghost anymore. So I moved. It was the wrong call. We walked straight into an ambush, gunfire from 3 sides, men screaming. And Marcus, the guy who paced me, who believed in me when nobody else did, Marcus took 2 rounds dragging me out of the kill zone. He lived, but he never walked the same again. And that was on me. They wanted to discharge me. A review board, a stack of reports, a career finished before it even started. I could have blamed the intel. I could have blamed the terrain. Instead, I stood in front of that board and said 4 words: "The mistake was mine." Silence. Then the colonel leaned forward and said something I have never forgotten. "Anyone can win. I'm looking for men who own their losses." They didn't discharge me. They gave me a second chance. And I swore, standing next to Marcus's hospital bed, that I would never again send another man into the dark without knowing exactly what was waiting there. So I started over. I trained harder than anyone. I read every manual twice. I made sergeant. Then I earned my commission. An officer. Me, the kid they called Ghost. I led a platoon, then a company. I buried friends. I wrote letters to mothers I would never meet. I took shrapnel in my leg and was back in the field 6 weeks later. Every rank came with a heavier weight, and I carried all of it. Battalion commander, colonel. And then, 22 years after that sergeant told me I'd never make it, they pinned a 4th star on my shoulder. But the hardest decision of my life was still coming. It came at 3 in the morning. 11,000 of our soldiers were cut off, surrounded, running out of ammunition and running out of time. The satellite feed showed enemy forces closing in from every direction, and my staff was split down the middle. One option: pull everyone back and abandon the position. Safe, but it would cost us the entire region. The other option: push a rescue column through a single narrow corridor. And if my read on the enemy was wrong, I would lose thousands of men in one night. Every person in that room turned and looked at me, and for 1 second, I was face down in the mud again, 20 pounds behind. You'll never be a real soldier. But this time, I knew something that Sergeant never did. I knew what was waiting in the dark, because I had spent 22 years refusing to send men there blind. I gave the order, send the column, threading it exactly where the enemy wasn't looking. For 6 hours, I didn't breathe. Then the radio crackled. "Corridor is open, they're coming home." Every single soldier made it out, all 11,000, And the first call I made wasn't to the president. It was to a man in a wheelchair, half a world away, who once tossed me a protein bar and said, "I'll pace you." Marcus answered on the first ring. I said, "We made it, brother." I joined the army with nothing. They told me I'd never be a real soldier. I retired as a 4-star general, and the only thing that ever separated the ghost from the general was the day I decided to own my mistakes and never quit. If this story hit you the way it hit me, do me one favor. Tap that subscribe button and go watch the next video right now, because your climb to the top starts the moment this one ends.